During my time in graduate school, workshops were the courses I enjoyed the most. Understanding how my work read, how other people who were also thinking purposefully and pointedly and slowly and deliberately about language, words, about fiction and poetry, how they were reading, as in interpreting, understanding, making sense of my work. And from there, going back to the proverbial drawing board and using the critique I received from them, my colleagues and my professors, to improve what I had written. The best part of the writing process to me is revision. I took one workshop where the final project for the class was a full-length poetry collection, 60 pages of poetry due at the end of the 16-week semester. And the purpose of that assignment, the purpose of the way the professor designed that particular course, she explained to us, was for us to learn how not to be precious with our work. Think about a precious gem or a porcelain figure or a valuable family heirloom. The more a precious thing is handled, the more its perceived value diminishes. The more precious something is, the less it can be handled, the less you can touch it, poke at it, mold it, shape it, pick it up and look under it, move it to another spot on the mantle, because the precious thing is always at risk of being damaged. You don't get to study it. You don't get to play with it. It becomes inaccessible. And that study and that play is what revision is. So the point of that assignment was for us to get out of the habit of making the writing process an emotional labor, to release ourselves so that we could release our work, so that we could actually do the work of writing. And I struggled with that initially, but as time went on and as new semesters began, I continued learning and internalizing that lesson. And in some ways, I'm still internalizing that lesson, in fact. But that's an aside, though a necessary one, and I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is LaSandra Cummings. I am a multi-genre writer and educator and founder of Intervision's Writing Lab. And if you find writing revision difficult, I'm glad you found your way here. Revision is difficult in the sense that it requires effort, meaning on some level it's perplexing, it's puzzling. It requires you to be putting together a puzzle. The second draft is where you start to see your puzzle pieces clearly, the tabs and blanks of the pieces. The second draft is where you begin to see them. Walter Mosley, in his book, This Year You Write Your Novel, defines the second draft as simply reading the first draft. I subscribe to that notion. While completing your first draft, you get tangled up inside of it in a way, and your task is to find your way through and out of that initial storytelling, that initial telling of the story you're making. And once you bring that initial draft to a close, you review it. The point of the first draft is to get to the second draft, is to put forth an initial vision to revision. There are words that I don't want to employ here because I'm attempting to impart a certain philosophy around writing, revising, and the second draft in particular. I could say, for example, that the second draft is where and when you confront what you've written, but that insinuates opposition. It positions you against the writing. And when we insist on looking at it that way, when you see your project as something to be bested or wrangled, something to fight with or struggle against, you've already lost, so to speak. Because now the relationship between you and the work is an adversarial one instead of a collaborative one, one of camaraderie, and dare I say, one of love. The second draft is where you re enter your vision, it's where you see it again. The second draft is the second vision. There are two types of vision: circumscribed vision, which has limits or bounds, and cyclopedic vision, which covers everything or all the important parts. Cyclopedic vision is concerned with the work as a whole, with the world you've created as a whole. It's a global vision and a type of seeing that can only occur once you have a whole work to review. That is, once you finished your first draft. Circumscribed vision is seeing what you're creating as you're creating it, and therefore it's limited. You can only see so much. You can only see what's around what you've written. There's only so much to be seen during that initial drafting process. I want to be clear that the second draft is not a plan, though you may make some notes, some light corrections with tense and misspellings. For example, during your first full-length read, which is the second draft, just the act of reading what you wrote, this is not where you construct a game plan for rewriting. That comes when you're ready to move on to the third draft. The second draft is where you receive what you've been given, where you observe what you've put out simply. Looking through that cyclopedic lens, that global vision, you're able to be in a state of query, to make inquiries, which is not interrogation, it's not investigation, it's not adversarial. It is reflection, consideration, where you're open for encounters with new knowledge, new possibility, new truths. Where interrogation demands certain knowledge, certain truths. Interrogation is closed rather than open. It's fear rather than love, as Eve Sedgwick has written in her book, Touching Feeling. The second draft is where you become your own first reader. This is where you begin asking questions like, does each character in your community have the appropriate depth as individual parts to the whole? Are the events sequenced appropriately as parts of the whole? What is the work of this scene? Would it be better to zoom out with summary? What is the work of this summary? Would it be more effective to zoom in with a bit of scene? How are certain components working together? Are they working together? How do the parts the narrative has chosen to focus on influence the whole? From the start of the story to the end of it, how has the world changed? Which tends to be a more interesting question than how has the character or characters changed? How has the world that they share shifted? From the answers that these questions garner, you begin to see your puzzle pieces, their tabs and blanks. You begin to see what this work can become, not what you thought it'd be when you wrote it, but what it can be on its own, what it can be now. Think about raising a child. The child is who they are despite what you thought they would be. And allowing that child to be who they are, allowing the work to become what it is where that love comes back in. And you begin to ask yourself, who do I need to become? Who do I need to be in order to rear this work, in order to get this work to be what it can become, in order to get this work to be the best version of itself as my child whom I love? Who am I in relation to this specific work? Not to your work in general, not to your craft in general, not to your writing in general. It's not about what you usually do in your writing or the routes that you usually take or the thing that you did in that last work. It's about this work specifically. It's all about this individual child, this unique first draft. Then you create a game plan for revision, which is the start of the third draft. The plan addresses your community of characters, plot and structure, conflict, pacing, POV, research, any or all of that, even more than that. Then you execute the plan. Then you review it again and again, and as many times as it takes for you to become the writer you need to be in order to get the work to be what it can become.